Why is it that every single time the progressives are opening their mouths nowadays, it's showing us more and more why we should not be supporting them anymore, especially monetarily. And this interview really pushed me over the edge because I see and understand all the hurt and pain that's out there right now in the country. I see that. I feel it. And I feel that there's an urgency because there's a lot of crises on the horizon, and there's a lot of ones happening right now. The housing crisis, there's going to be a healthcare crisis, especially considering COVID-19 and the fact that it's going to stay around. And, these Pfizer already said that their vaccine only lasts 6 months, so they're going to need a booster shot. These healthcare and pharma companies are going to skyrocket the price of these vaccines. And then who's going to see that? Well, the insurance companies, as a result of that, are going to skyrocket their prices, and then that's going to go straight to the consumer. So there will be a healthcare crisis coming. There's already a housing crisis. Gas is already $4, $5 out here in California. Food is becoming more expensive. Everything is becoming more expensive, right? Are you making more money? Is your minimum wage increased? Is your wage increasing with the inflation that's happening in the country right now? No, of course not. So I see all these things happening. And so I have some urgency behind what I'm saying and have some urgency behind what I'm pushing for. Why is it that me on the outside as a progressive and as a lefty is pushing harder than the people that are actually in power and have the power to actually affect change? Why is that dynamic there? This article, for me, is the last straw. And I know for a lot of other people, the last straw was way far back, even before Force the Vote. But I was still holding on to a little bit of hope. But after everything that's happened with AOC and giving money to moderate corporate Democrats, trying to become this new type of Nancy Pelosi to win some brownie points. And of course, they don't even want to accept it because they hate progressivism and they hate lefty politics and they hate actually redistributive policies that much that they won't even take money from AOC. Yet she's still trying to give it to them, even though they oppose Medicare for all. So we're literally she's taking money from you, the grassroots supporter, and giving it to people who don't support Medicare for all in 2021 after a global health pandemic. So for a lot of people, the last straw was before. But if you're still supporting Pramila Jayapal and the progressives after this bullshit article where they rationalize and justify not getting you anything in the American Rescue Plan that's an actual progressive priority and things that Joe Biden ran on, campaigned on, and promised, then then you're no better than the liberals who will defend Nancy Pelosi, and Steny Hoyer, Chuck Schumer, all these liberal Democrats at every single turn, even though they continue to produce nothing, no results. So let's get into this because it's very, very telling. This article is very telling. Representative this is from Time Magazine. Representative Pramila Jayapal on how she is pushing Biden to be more progressive and creating the tipping point for change. I'm just going to tell you right now, that's complete bullshit. So I'll preface this whole segment by saying that's completely bullshit. Representative okay, none of this matters. This is talking about how she got into politics and all that stuff and her background. If anything, it makes it worse. It makes it worse what she's going to say after that. So I'm going to skip that part. Let's start here. She has said that the experience taught her that even tragedies can be opportunities for change. But after years of agitating from the outside, Jayapal is a bona fide insider. That's completely correct. And you'll see in the rest of this article why that's completely correct. After 2 years in the Washington State Senate, she was elected to Congress in 2016, and she spent her first years fighting President Donald Trump at every turn. Now, as the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, she is one of the most influential officials of the Democrats' left flank, and she has become a primary conduit between President Joe Biden and those in his party who think he's an overly cautious centrist. No. We don't think that. We know that's the case because Joe Biden has been in politics for 40 years and has a long track record of not being an overly cautious centrist, of being a bona fide Republican conservative. in his legislation. That's who Joe Biden is. That's who we all knew Joe Biden was, which is why we were saying, don't just promise you're going to vote for Joe Biden. Actually extract something out of him. Now, Bernie did that for one thing, and what was that? The $15 minimum wage. Did that get put into the American Rescue Plan? No. Joe Biden did everything he could to make sure that wasn't in the plan. So we don't think he's an overly cautious centrist. He is a bona fide conservative Republican, and he's the leader of the Democratic Party. And you wonder why there's no solutions to any of the real solutions to the issues that we are facing right now. There's just Band-Aids, and if there's a housing, there's an eviction crisis coming, let's just kick it down the road. Oh, people can't afford their health care. Well, let's subsidize Cobra, which is ridiculously expensive and just a giveaway to health insurance companies. Let's do all that instead of actually having some real policies that are going to help the average person. She said, they continue. Her journey from activist to powerful legislator was aided by an approach that melds progressive beliefs with pragmatic style, a combination that has won her respect from both Democratic camps. What progressive wins has that pragmatic style gotten them? Because there's none, there's none that I can point to that I can see. Continuing, but legislating in a government under unified Democratic control is a more nuanced project than pushing for ambitious proposals from the outside or even from the minority party. So AKA when you're not actually governing and when you don't actually have the power, you can actually push for real transformative change like Medicare for all, like free public college, ending the wars, reinvesting that money back here, an actual infrastructure package that's worth the shit. You can actually push for that when your party's not in control. But once your party's in control, you can't push for those things anymore. You can't actually agitate and push for the things that you ran on anymore. You have to be more nuanced. You see how they're being co-opted completely into the Democratic Party? Completely. Okay, continuing. Where were we? Even from the minority party. Jayapal's continued influence in D.C. depends on her ability to convince her caucus that compromise and incremental gains can sometimes be the best way forward, and on her success at making that true. Governing is different than opposing, she says, and I think we are all getting used to the idea that we are governing. So incremental, she is literally admitting to being a incrementalist now. And this is what I've been saying. They point to these tiny little incremental gains and act like they're humongous giant wins. Do you understand the gravity of the crisis that we're facing in this country? Do you think incrementalism can fix or be a solution to those crises? I mean, we're talking when billionaires get $1 trillion to $2 trillion richer during the pandemic, a whole crisis, economic crisis, healthcare crisis, social crisis. They get over $1 trillion richer. Workers lose over $2 trillion. And you think incrementalism is the way to push forward? This is not what y'all ran on. And I encourage anyone who is still donating to the Justice Democrats or the Progressives to stop immediately, because unless you're okay with incremental gains, and complete compromise with a right-wing party like the Democrats, like the corporate Democrats are who run that party, the Joe Manchin types, the Nancy Pelosi types, unless you're okay with that, then I would not be giving them my money anymore, especially because with everything increasing in price, you're going to need all that money. You're going to need it because gas is getting more expensive. Middle-class people are getting priced out of housing. Okay, healthcare is getting more expensive. Food's getting more expensive. Do not send your money to someone in Congress who is going to be okay with incremental gains pushed for through a right-wing corporate party. Governing is different than opposing. Yeah, when you're governing, you actually have power to affect change. When you're opposing, you're trying to build up support for your agenda. And then when you get into power, you use that support to ram through parts of your agenda. That's how the game works. Somehow I understand that, but people that have been in politics for way longer than me and who are actually in Congress and this is their literal job to do this every day, don't understand that dynamic? The central question for Jayapal and the left is how far Biden is willing to go. Biden doesn't support Medicare for all, which is one of Jayapal's signature policies, and he's more moderate on most economic issues than Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, whom Jayapal endorsed in the presidential primary. Nor does Biden so far support eliminating a filibuster, the Senate rule that effectively requires 60 votes to pass most legislation, which Jayapal and other progressives want to scrap. Okay, we understand that without the filibuster being scrapped, you're not going to get any of this legislation that you're pushing and you're, parading out there as this great legislation like H.R. 1, like, the Equality Act, et cetera, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, any of those things. So you can't, on the one hand, push and tell us that those are great pieces of legislation, and then on the other hand, not actually push to get the thing that's blocking all those things from getting, all those pieces of legislation from getting enacted into place. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have it both ways. If you're actually going to come out and tell us that those are great pieces of legislation, then you have to be willing to say, we're not voting for shit until we get rid of the filibuster, because that's the only way we're going to be able to actually govern in, in this democracy that we claim to have, where 10 people of the party that's not even in power can just block every single thing from happening. All right, let's continue. But Jayapal says she has never been interested in replicating the antagonistic relationship between the right-wing House Freedom Caucus and Republican leadership that divided the GOP starting in 2015. Instead of acting as an opposition arm, she says she wants to be a proposition one, proposing the most progressive ideas possible and framing them in ways that can persuade her colleagues and the president to support them. Yo, how naive are progressives in Congress? And Jayapal is looked at as the leader of the progressives in Congress. She's been in there the longest. How naive does she think? And what type of game does she think is being played in D.C.? They don't not support this stuff because they just don't understand. Ro Khanna was parroting the same bullshit before, and so was Ilhan Omar. Just proposing things. We did our job because we proposed it. It got proposed. It made it in the House legislation, even though everyone knew it wasn't going to stay in that Senate legislation without force, without y'all withholding your vote and actually forcing it in there, without a public fight. Anyone who's paying attention can understand that, except the progressives who we elected to actually be our champion in Congress. They think just being a proposition arm and just proposing things and appealing to the good-natured heart of these corporate right-wing bought and sold for right-wing conservative Democrats. She thinks just proposing things and framing things in a good light is going to actually do something. They don't not support those things because they don't understand. They don't support it because they get cash, campaign cash, from the very people that would have a net loss if this legislation and these type of legislations were enacted. That's why they don't support it. Anyone knows that. Y'all know that. That's why y'all run on not taking corporate money, because you understand how corporate money can affect your decision making and your judgment when it comes to legislation. So now all of a sudden we don't know that exists anymore, and we just think we can act as some type of proposition arm, even though the only power you have is that there's small difference and small margin in the House. That's the only power you have. Otherwise, you're literally outnumbered 160 to 20 or whatever, 180 to 20, 200 to 20. So it's just it's unbelievable to see these words uttered in an article. She actually put this out into the public. They don't plan on being antagonistic, ever. They don't plan on being oppositional, ever. They plan on being propositional. Is that why you gave them money? Is that why you support the Justice Democrats? Because they were going to be propositional. They were just going to go in there and propose good things and never do anything to get them passed. Is that why you gave them money? Is that why you supported them? She says that the model worked for Biden's COVID-19 relief legislation. The American Rescue Plan looked a lot like what progressive members wanted, and Biden got there in part because of the careful negotiating by people like Jayapal. So now they're all confused. Now they're all out of sorts because Ilhan Omar was just on there with I think Mehdi Hassan talking about how, this kind of was a win, kind of wasn't. We wanted the $15 minimum wage to get in there, but it just didn't make it in, and there's nothing we could have done about it. And now Jayapal's over here saying, "Oh, it completely worked. Our strategy completely worked." Even after Ilhan Omar already said that their strategy worked because they got it proposed, even though it failed because the $15 minimum wage did not make it in that package. So if they're planning on using the same negotiating skills that they were using for the American Rescue Plan, do you think they're actually going to get a $15 minimum wage anytime soon? Do you actually think they're going to get a public option, which Joe Biden has completely stopped talking about and was one of the reasons that Jayapal said she didn't want to do force the vote, because she didn't want to mess up the task force commitments that she got from Joe Biden when it came to a public option? I haven't heard Joe Biden say shit about a public option. He didn't put in his last bill. He's not planning on putting in the next bill. In fact, what did he do? He actually further entrenched our capitalist for-profit health insurance industry by subsidizing COBRA, essentially giving taxpayer dollars, completely wasteful spending, to health insurance companies just through September. So I don't know. And this goes along with them saying this was a win. And so all these pieces of evidence are there in front of our face. We just have to start actually accepting it for what it is and stop getting, our minds confused by what these progressives used to be and what they used to signal and how they used to fight. We have to understand where we are in this country. There's a lot of horrible shit going on, and that will be going on in the future once some of these moratoriums come up. And if there's no real policies in place by the Democratic Party to actually mitigate those crises, it's just going to get worse. We need to get out of this American exceptionalist thinking that everything's just going to, the moral arc of America is just going to continue to get better. And everything's going to get better eventually just because we're America and we believe it. No. That's not how we got to this point where people are living paycheck to paycheck, can't afford a $400 emergency. And this is before the pandemic. And now more wealth has been transferred upward to the billionaire class. And now middle class people can't even afford a home because you need $500,000 cash ready to go on a $250,000 bullshit shack, glorified shack. You need $500,000 cash. So the middle class being further squeezed out into poverty. Because where do most middle class people hold their wealth? In their home. Now middle class people can't even get a home anymore. That's the situation we're dealing with right now. And do y'all think that these are the insurgent people that are going to bring us out of this crisis, that are going to help us lift us out of these crises, actually hold the Democratic Party, which is a corporate right-wing party, to account? No, because they don't see that as their job. They see their job as just proposing good things and framing arguments in a good way so that their corporate Democrats are colleagues and friends are just going to find it in their heart to actually start representing the people and not the corporations that have helped keep them in power by giving them money every election cycle. It's really not that complicated. It's really not. Throughout the process, Jayapal kept in close contact with House and Senate leadership, and her team spoke to the White House Legislative Affairs staff almost daily, she says. When a $15 minimum wage increase fell out of the package because of Senate rules, some Democrats considered this is the most telling part of this article and why Pramila Jayapal should never, from here on out, be considered any type of leader of progressives in Congress. Any type of leader. Throughout the process, Jayapal kept in close contact with House and Senate leadership. Her team spoke to the White House Legislative Affairs staff almost daily, she says. When a $15 minimum wage increase fell out of the package because of Senate rules, some Democrats considered withholding their votes entirely, which is what we were saying they needed to do if they wanted to get this $15 minimum wage actually in the package. If they wanted to be listened to, they had to be willing to withhold their votes. We were saying that back in December with Force the Vote, and then other people came around to our point of view, which we knew was right, and said the progressives need to do this on a $15 minimum wage, withhold their vote. And if they don't do it now, they ain't doing it in the future. Okay, so they were going to withhold their votes entirely. Jayapal helped persuade those members to support the deal. and it passed almost entirely along party lines. Progressives have been sort of pushed to the margins so often in politics that I think we may have gotten used to that, Jayapal says. And so people are very inclined to say, oh, this has happened again. We didn't get everything we wanted. But she taught her colleagues to realize we should take the win. She taught her colleagues that they should fall the fucking line and not do anything to get that $15 minimum wage in that bill. So as all these prices are soaring, as the purchasing power of the average Joe, the average American is getting less and less and less, with all these packages that are passing that are just further widening the wealth gap. Because where does that $1,400 check that you just got go to? Your landlord. And who's your landlord? Chances are it's BlackRock or one of these other massive hedge fund corporations. There's no redistributive policies. None. And so the fact that they consider this a win, honestly, pathetic and embarrassing. Pathetic and embarrassing. It's pathetic to Pramila Jayapal that you went out there and actually told your colleagues who were actually ready and willing and were ready to have the courage to do the right thing and actually wield power and actually use the public support that progressives have and that this progressive pieces of legislation and progressive ideas have. She convinced them, no. We have to go with the party. We have to go with the party. Why? Because I'm talking to the White House legislative affairs staff every day. Every single day I'm talking to them. So don't worry about it. I'm talking to them. I'm on the inside. I'm now a bona fide insider. So we can't be an insurgent type of Freedom Caucus like coalition. We can't do that. We can't withhold our votes. We can't do any of that shit. We have to fall in line and work behind the scenes to try and get things passed, even though there's no evidence, literally none, zero evidence to show that strategy works, that those tactics work. Because you're not threatening them with anything. You're not threatening their power. Why is this so hard to get through their dense heads? This is very, very enraging, because this shows me that they will never fight. They will always work behind the scenes, ask Joe Biden and Joe Manchin, can you pretty please support this? And when they say, fuck you, I'm going to do whatever I want that my corporate back donors and the corporations want. When I do that, you're going to sit there and take it. Why? Because you have in the past, and all you put out there while the corporate Democrats are withholding their votes over tax cuts for the wealthy and, a less increased global corporate tax rate. While they're doing that, they're putting that out, all that messaging out there. What are the progressives putting out there? We will fall in line whenever asked. It's the strategy. Hold on, let me go back to this. It's the strategy Jayapal plans to pursue on other policies. So just taking the win, taking what they give. It's the strategy she plans to pursue on other policies, while still trying to bring Biden further left behind the scenes. Biden called Jayapal after the relief passage to thank her for her help, she says. And while she thanked him for his leadership on the law in return, she also told him she still wants to see the minimum wage increased. And what is she going to do about it? What are progressives going to do about it? Not a goddamn thing. Not a damn thing. They will fall in line whenever. Why? Because Pramila Jayapal just told us that they will. She just told us that. She just told us that her strategy will be the same on the American Rescue Plan as it is on the rest of the legislation that comes out. That's going to be their policy. So if you still want to support them, go ahead. If you still want to support them and apologize for them for everything they do and rationalize away the inaction, go ahead. But I'm not doing it anymore. I'm done. Vote third party. Do not vote for the Democrats. Do not do that. Do not waste your money on Democrats. Don't do it. Because they are not an oppositional force within the Democratic Party. Pramila Jayapal has told us they are a propositional force within the Democratic Party, meaning they will propose good things but never fight for those things to get enacted, and always cave when asked to by Joe Biden, Joe Manchin, and the corporate Democrats.